Good evening and welcome to nGendr Live. It's our fifth broadcast, I think, and it's a very chilly night here in the UK. Now, we've got our usual 4 participants on. Well, I say usual, it's not the usual 4 people. We've got the usual number of people. So I'll introduce them to you now. So we've got Charlotte on today.
Hey.
We've got Rachel.
Hello again. Hello.
And on the first time today, we've got Luna.
Hiya.
So, as usual, we're really keen to get people to weigh in and give us topics and questions to talk about. So if you've got anything you want to talk about, then please do drop us a line so you can either talk to us in the chat here on YouTube, or if you particularly desire, you could send us a tweet or something at n_gender. But YouTube chat is best. We're hoping to get lots of topics from there to talk about, and of course if you've got any comments on what we're talking about, then please do send us that as well. We've got a couple of topics for you tonight that we've got prepared. So the first of which is we want to talk about the trans equality debate that was in the House of Commons in the last week, and also we want to talk about the article that was written in the Daily Mail by India Willoughby, who is of course the trans woman who's been on Loose Women recently. So, and of course, if you want, if you've got anything else burning desire that you want us to talk about, we'll talk about that as well. We should have time. So, without further ado, I think Rachel's going to give us a bit of an outline on what's happened in the House of Commons in the last week or so.
Okie dokie, I shall do give my best and tell you what I know. It's not a huge amount. So I'm no parliamentarian. I don't really understand the whole process or what it means, but I did watch a good chunk of the debate. I wasn't able to watch it live, but also I watched it last night. So where are we at? The Commons and Women's Equality Committee, I think it was, had their initial submissions and so forth in October. I think it was last year. I think they, if I remember rightly, they produced their report in December, and I think the government gave their response in May. So this is finally, I think, over 6 months later. The first time it's actually been debated in the Commons. I mean, not just the first time this particular report has been debated, but the first time that transgender and non-binary equality at all has been debated. And I use non-binary deliberately there because they did get some good mentions, actually, and it was good to hear a lot of that covered. Attendance was okay. I mean, as I say, I don't fully understand sort of ins and outs of Parliament and what one might expect. There were around, I think it was 22 or so members there debating. And if nothing else, what I have to say is that there was, the whole debate was very positive. There was really only one moment rather early on, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail shortly, when someone sort of stepped in to basically potentially oppose trans rights, if you like, and say, oh, this could be dangerous. At which point the other 21 people in the House said, no, that's bollocks. So overall, it was very good to hear the sort of high quality of the debate, unlike my own language now. Apologies for that. So yeah, it was all very heartening to hear. There was very worthy speeches there from Maria Miller, who was the chair of the committee, if I remember correctly, and from other people whose names I've written down but I have forgotten right now. Angela Cordy was one of them, Ben Howlett of Bath, and they all gave really good, very good speeches, covering a great many issues. So it was really good to hear them all get an airing in the Commons and actually hear it discussed in a place where one would hope some benefit might actually come of it eventually. Having said all that, I suppose we should at least talk about the one opposing voice, which did turn up, which did get a little bit of coverage in the press and I think the response, and it got mentioned on Twitter and so forth.
This was Caroline Flint, wasn't it?
Yeah, Caroline Flint, wonderful Doncaster or something about area, who interrupted, as is the way you're allowed to do these things apparently, interrupted Maria Miller's speech and said, oh, isn't there a danger that by having gender-neutral toilet facilities that it might, now what was the phrasing she used? It was something rather, basically it was bathroom panic. then it might pose more of a risk to women themselves. Hands up, who's a woman themselves? Yeah, just so there was certainly that moment of yeah, the bathroom panic thing being interjected, but thankfully several other people spoke up then, and I think raised it again later on in the debate. I think they came back to it and said that that's a red herring. You know, it's a matter for criminal law. Granting trans people rights does not take them away from other people, and all the sensible, correct responses. So yeah, with that one exception, it was all very positive and very good to hear, I have to say.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, to tackle that kind of point first about, you know, Caroline Flint and the bathroom panic piece, I guess it was inevitable. It was a shame to see that she's recycling a lot of the talking points that I'm sure we've all encountered on the internet from certain quarters. And I don't know why I'm avoiding saying that, because they can't search my words here, but you know, we all know who they are. And I think I wonder to what extent she really understands the issue, or whether she's kind of parroting a talking point there. I mean, the fact that she...
It was interesting to see that when she was challenged on it sort of online and so forth later on, I saw quite a few people sort of taking it to task on Twitter. And it was interesting to see that how robustly she was defending her position. So she wasn't saying, "Oh my God, it's wrong," she was more than happy to defend her rather turfy line.
Yeah, I mean, that's slightly
bit sad,
alarming. But then we've seen some of this stuff from Labour MPs before.
Yeah, I mean there was there was as I say, plenty of good stuff there to cheer as well. There was people citing examples of I think one of the members cited examples of aeroplanes. You don't get gender segregated toilets on planes. It's not really a big problem. People just manage and
It's just crazy, isn't it, how this toilet thing has turned into some sort of issue out of nothing. I don't really understand. There's a whole lot of nonsense spoken about it.
I think a comment I see in the chat from 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 5, 6. Yes, attendance appalling and mostly SNP. That is true. There was a lot of I think there were quite a few members from the SNP there, including, if I remember correctly, Angela Crawley, who gave the second speech in the debate. Very, very good. It was also they were talking about the GRA and self-determination of gender. And now I might have got this wrong. I think what was said in the debate, because I don't follow Scottish goings on that closely, I think what was said was that Scotland is determined to press ahead with self-determination, has decided to do that, but not made up.
Yeah.
Well, we can bring in our Scottish correspondent here and
yeah. Hello.
Yes, but I'm by no means an expert on Scottish law, but based on the kind of events I've been to and the politicians I've spoken to personally, yes, it's something they want to make a big point of the current Scottish Parliament. And another thing they really want to bring in is official non-binary recognition as well. Great news.
Yeah, there were several members who were talking in the debate and underlining how the GRA was widely recognised as being it was, what was the phrase that was used, sort of revolutionary for its time, but was now outdated and needed reform. And again, I don't think I recall anyone speaking against that.
Yeah, things have moved on very quickly since that happened, and self-declaration is now in Ireland and other places, so it seems like we could have it now.
There's a few people saying online it's the channel's freezing. Hopefully it's not us that's doing that. Hopefully it's just the occasional.
It's just when I stop moving sometimes.
Yeah, so we should move.
Yeah.
Having said all that, of course, about all these positive things that were said, I did not watch the entire debate. I think I got about 2/3 or half the way through or so forth. And as I say, I'm not perhaps, I don't fully understand sort of how this debate fits into the whole parliamentary process. I believe that what would have happened was after all of these many speeches saying, from various people saying, making the case that the rights need to be advanced and so forth, I'm assuming that near the end, that the government, that the Minister President would then give a response. I also assume that the response was probably not, yes, let's do that. It was probably rather more, inertia, shall we say. So, yeah, what happens next? I don't know, to be honest. I should probably read up more about this stuff. But it was certainly, in terms of the GRA, there was talk of, other countries going ahead of us now in terms of sort of leading the way with self-determination. Malta and Scotland, I think, both got to mention.
Well, yeah, and Malta hit the news today because they just banned conversion therapy.
Indeed, yeah.
Which is excellent. So Malta moving further ahead, which is great news for them.
Malta's one of the countries that's got self-declaration as well. I think there's
it's
5 or 6 countries.
It's ranked as the most LGBT-friendly place in the world.
Yeah, because there's Norway, there's Denmark, there's Malta, there's Argentina, there's Ireland, and I believe one other. Maybe someone on the question and answer thing can say what that. I think it was the 6th one. But yeah, I mean, the UK was very good at being one of the first to bring in a Gender Recognition Act, but of course, it's what we know. It's 12 years old now, so these things move forward very, very quickly. So we're kind of being left stood still. But as to kind of answer Rachel's questions to what's next, I think this is more kind of a sounding out exercise, this debate. It's going to be quite some time before any bills are drafted, and I think there's probably quite a few things such as the Brexit and so on that they will be kind of working on first. But yeah, it'll be bills drafted, votes on bills, adjustments to bills, changes to those, votes on those. It's a long process.
But you have to start somewhere, and it was good to hear.
You do. I think it's a step in the right direction, and it's gratifying to think that 21 out of 22 were pro-trans.
And I think, in fairness to Caroline Flynn, I don't think her position is entirely anti-trans as such. I think, and then the comment was made in the chat just now. It was her issue is this classic talking point we get about gender-neutral toilets and associating that with male violence, which is a problematic viewpoint. But I'm hoping that her position isn't that.
Ooh.
Well, it's possible anyway. I think the focus on like gender-neutral toilets and using toilets appropriate to our gender is people that are going to use, and it's very few people are going to abuse these facilities to maybe assault. It's a matter for criminal law. It's punishing those who are responsible. And having gender-neutral toilets.
Men
sorry, was that Rachel?
Sorry. Men can just walk into any toilets that they want to and do whatever they want. There's nothing stopping them. They don't need to present in any specific way to do it.
Yeah, and banning a group from a particular facility or disposing of an entire facility because of a risk, it's not right. It's just like deal with those responsible in an appropriate manner.
Yeah.
I'm back, by the way. I momentarily got cut off, but I'm here.
I think I finished your point for you. I am not quite yet, but
anyway. I hope you did.
It was seamless. Well done.
Because it was an excellent point.
Yeah.
I was going to make a joke when we were talking about bills about hoping that they've got the skills to pay the bills.
Well, thankfully, your connection drops, and we never got to hear.
No, Gritty.
I'm retiring from jokes. I can't make it. I'm surprised nobody's made any mention of that.
TP. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
There was a few other things I noticed during the debate. There was a few uses of what in other circumstances you might regard as problematic language. Where was some of the ones that I highlighted in my notes here? Let's talk about someone in their new gender. Well, that may be the right language. It depends upon the individual in question. There was transgenders as a plural noun. Yeah, rather you didn't. But given all of the other positive things that were being said, I'm happy to overlook it in this case, I think.
I think language-wise, there's a long way to go, and I think actually the language of our community is quite difficult to access from outside, and I think there are people who are good allies and who spend quite a lot of time with trans people and still will get stuff wrong from time to time, and it changes so fast.
Yeah, I mean, what's more important than language and individual choice of words is, of course, attitude, and the attitude was great. So.
Yeah, I think
it would be nice to be more of them.
As long as there are people making every reasonable effort to be polite and encouraging and supportive, then does it really matter if they get a few things wrong? All we do is just put information out there that gives up-to-date terminology, and then it's available for people.
I see one of the questions in the chat. I'm not quite sure what the question. Well, it's not a question, I suppose. What's meant? What seems to be an issue is self-declaration trans and whether they have a penis or not. Not quite sure what is meant by that comment, but what I shall expand on that, I suppose, is there was a lot of talk in the debate about the Gender Recognition Act being, as I think I mentioned before, was seen as being revolutionary for its time, but now basically not fit for purpose and outdated and in need of reform. And there was talk of recognition, if you forgive the pun, in the House of the fact that the Act is what was the word, sort of overly medicalised and quasi-judicial, whereas it should just be an individual assertion. And there was more than one of the debates speeches covered that point. What else was there? Oh, there's also,
if I was going to expand on that, so I guess perhaps what the commenter might be getting at here, and what they seem to be saying, is there's this issue, isn't there? We hear this so much that people won't accept a trans person's gender unless their genitalia matches their expectations of that gender. And get this idea of some people being okay with trans women in women's toilets, provided they've had GRS. Some people still aren't okay. And I guess this idea that the masses get to decide whether people's gender is what they say it is or not.
Yeah,
and there's lots of how do they even know? But then, it's this kind of normative way of looking at things that's kind of outdated, and that's reflected in the GRA, isn't it? So although you're supposed to be able to get a gender recognition certificate if you haven't had bottom surgery, it doesn't happen very often, does it?
Not that I've heard.
They want to know why, and you have to have a good reason why.
Yeah, and there was talk again in one of the speeches about the process of application being arduous and humiliating, and various other adjectives that we are familiar with. So all of this did get an airing in the speeches. It was good to hear.
Well, it sounds like they've certainly listened, or some of them have listened, which is good news. So certainly in Scotland they are anyway, so you're all right, Charlotte, up there.
Well, I don't know. I'm born in England, and sometimes that makes me slip through nets.
Yeah. Well, I probably won't be bothering to write to my local MP about anything, because he once said that Enoch Powell was kind of right about that Rivers of Blood speech, so he's not really the nicest guy.
Sign, is it?
Yeah. I'm
not very keen on the whole gender recognition panel idea. I don't feel that other people should be able to decide what my gender is. I feel that it's up to me what my gender is, and that they shouldn't. It should be. Yeah. I feel that until we have a chance to change the law properly, the gender recognition panel should now be effectively a rubber stamping situation. So anybody who passes their desks now should just
I mean, I have some sympathy with this idea that there has to be some sort of check and balance. And I'm not saying I want there to be, but I have some sympathy with the idea, because you will get, unfortunately, idiots trying to game the system for some sort of personal gain if you don't have some sort of check. But that doesn't need to take the shape of someone deciding on stuff for you.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but, and I guess, you know, you can't critique things without a counter proposal, but that's what I'm doing. It's just, it only takes a couple of people to be idiots. I mean, the classic example that people always gave was around pensions, when pensionable age was different. And you said, well, you'd get cis men getting themselves reclassified as women so they could get their pension earlier, and it's like, that's ludicrous. But you know that would have happened were that to be a possibility. But of course that can't happen now. So it's...
Yeah. I've had the bank say things to me like they're worried that somebody would pretend to be the opposite gender so that they could commit fraud. And I basically said back to them that there's a lot easier ways to commit fraud than pretending to be the opposite gender. It just does. It's completely nonsensical.
Well,
these sort of excuses that people sometimes give.
This is a great one you always get, isn't it? When they're saying, when they're trying to use that excuse when they won't speak to you on the phone or something because your voice doesn't sound right, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, but you could be a man pretending to be this person to get access to your account." It's like, well, if I was a man wanting to get access to a woman's account, I wouldn't phone up. I would get a woman I know to phone up, and then there would be no problem.
Yeah, I've had that phone call with my bank. It didn't go well.
Yeah. Anyway, going back to the point, and it's being talked about in the chat now. This idea that trans women are somehow a risk in women's toilets is that you can't legislate based on the idea that some members of society have a distaste for other members of society being in same spaces as them, because what happens when you do that is you start to get xenophobic legislation, racist legislation, all this stuff is all legitimised because some people don't like those people. So you can't go down that road. We've already got laws to cover people doing things they shouldn't be doing in public spaces. So
yeah, and you know, the objectors are completely right. You know, some trans women might assault other people. So do cis women. So do cis men. So do trans men. Everyone. You know, a segment of every part of society is going to be a jerk and assault someone. It's just deal with the cases where they turn up. And you know what you legislate against, it's assault, not against trans people.
Yeah, you can't really prevent it. You have to just, you know, it's got to be a social reason why people don't do it, and if they do it, then they hopefully get punished.
Mm. Yeah, which is basically
appropriately.
We haven't placed at the moment, right? So, yeah.
So I'm conscious we've not talked that much about kind of the healthcare provision side of what was talked about, because I know that was talked about at some length in there, particularly around GPs training and access to healthcare and so on. And did that feel like that was a positive?
It certainly got mentioned. I mean, that there was, yes, there was talk in the debate. I didn't watch the entire thing, but in the section I did watch, there was talk about problems of healthcare, of course, of the sort of the long delays of accessing healthcare, about endemic transphobia in healthcare and education and all sorts of other systems. Let me see if I can find my notes that I wrote on this somewhere. And where else was there? I've mistaken it. And yes, one of the members sort of gave an example of one of their constituents had said, you know, that they went to their GP in order to access, you know, trans healthcare in order to be go to GIC or whatever it was. And their GP, on their very first meeting with that particular person, or patient, I suppose, in that context, said basically no, because you'll be taking away from more deserving cancer sufferers. Trans person, you don't need care. Cancer people need care. Yeah. God, does that really still happen? That's just appalling. As I was watching it on the sofa the other day, watching
that's just malpractice.
It's appalling, yeah. And yeah, as I was watching it, and my wife was just on the sofa next to me, and we just like open mouth at that section, like, what? That happened? Sadly, yes, it does.
It's not up to that individual GP. It's up to the system to decide that, and the system has decided that we should get healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like everybody else does.
Yeah. So the concept and even individual words, trans flu, got to mention it in the chamber.
Oh.
But yeah, of trans flu as the go along to talk about your your dodgy elbow, and they start asking you about your gender, because that's obviously somehow relevant, even though it's not. Yes, that has now been debated and mentioned in the House of Commons. So yeah, you've got that.
And I know there was talk of RLE being problematic as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was brought up. So.
Indeed.
Sorry, Luna, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think it's still common for people to be discriminated against by their GPs. I've got a friend who has had certain treatment withheld, and as I understand it, the GMC hasn't taken any action against any complaints against GPs for failing to provide healthcare to trans people, and they need to start.
Yep, yeah, and I've heard similar things as well, and it's very much postcode based. Some areas are better,
Yeah,
and some are fairly terrible. I'm just going to the comments at the minute, so a couple of things. Has anyone heard any more on the West London Mental Health Trust new service provider? I haven't, as far as I know. That's still in the system somewhere.
Well, is that going to take months and months? I'd assume these things probably do, but
I don't know.
it could be that nobody answers the tender.
that is possible. Yeah, we should.
In which case, I'll answer it. I'll sort it out. I wrote that article on nGendr about it, which I'm sure everybody's read because you're big nGendr fans. From my service management perspective, but actually, they're a very good point, which everyone should be aware of. And I'm reading this out, even though everybody's seeing it, which is about promoting local trans group patient advocacy. So when people go to see their GP, if they're struggling with their GP, or if they feel like they need some support, that they've got some access to advocacy or local support, so that someone could either go with them or help support them and help them know what they need to say and what their rights are if they're dealing with a difficult GP. So that's there are resources out there. So I know UK Trans Info and stuff have got some stuff on that. There's Action for Trans Health as well that can probably help with that kind of things. They've got some good resources, so to definitely support those organisations. Right, so unless there's any really important points on that anyone still wants to make, I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next one.
Okay.
So again, to reiterate, that if people want to suggest some topics that they want us to talk about, or they've got any questions they want answered, please let us know through the chat. But we've got one more topic we wanted to discuss, which is
the latest article in the Daily Mail that was written by India Willoughby. So it was kind of a one-to-one interview where she was answering questions about her time on Loose Women and being TV presenter and her trans identity. And yes, we just wanted to discuss that. So, does anyone have anything they wish to bring up?
Yeah, it was a good article. I liked the fact that she answered the 6 questions at the bottom. I wasn't completely happy the way that she answered every single one of the questions, but I thought that overall it was not a bad article on the usual standards of the Daily Mail.
Absolutely.
So for
the almost exclusively positive.
Haven't read the article. What were those 6 questions, Luna?
I'm just trying to get them for you. The first one is, should we go through each one one by one? The first one is, isn't this just a fad? and she goes on to say that we were only ever written about and as fakes.
So is this what she's written?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's I'm having a bit of technical problems of my own here.
So the first one, the first question was.
There's one I can see there. It says, "Why did you decide to become a woman?" The first heading, which is in the article there.
Well, of course, this is her saying stuff that she gets asked. So this isn't obviously her language. So
No, absolutely. Mostly her language is very good, and I like the fact that she highlights these questions and also then addresses them without necessarily answering them. You know, because a lot of these questions do not deserve direct answers, or at least they deserve a response. You know, which isn't actually, you know, there is no answer to. You know, why did you decide to become a woman? Because the question itself is nonsense, of course. So there's that. Is this just a fad? And yeah, obviously she answers that in rather more than just a sort of yes/no response, and goes and gives her sort of story and context as to why this is right for her. Have you had, the op? Yeah, it's question number 3, and again she doesn't give an answer. Good, I'm glad. Or at least she does give.
Which she does say, "I've completed all of my surgeries," but she doesn't say what all of her surgeries are. So.
Yeah. She doesn't sort of give a yes/no to that particular question. Are you gay? Question 4. Maybe so, but it's completely irrelevant, of course, and certainly not gay in the context of men, anyway.
Although that's where the controversial bit for me came in, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah, so I was just going to cover the last 2 questions just briefly. What's your real name? Real name is whatever you say it is, right? It's no more real than any other name. And are you worried you'll regret it? Well, that's probably a very easy, directly answerable one. Absolutely not, I think, as she says, and most of us would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So, should we go back to the bit I want to talk about?
Yeah. Go on. How you got a connection again, Natalie? Go and wind up and watch it go.
Well, whilst I'm not being cut off. So yeah, this is the bit. So in the article, she has written a piece in the section where we talked about, she was saying, being asked, "Are you gay?" She's saying, and I'll quote verbatim, "Honestly, I'm not really sure why LGB is grouped in with the T. First 3 are who you want to sleep with. The last is who you are. I'm not a gay man dressing up as a woman." Now, that's true. But I don't think it's helpful to talk about that the T shouldn't be grouped with the LGB and all the other letters. There is one number, but all the other letters as well. So it's unhelpful for me on a number of levels. One, we experience a lot of the same oppressions. To a lot of laymen in the street, lay people, I should probably say, we are the same thing. Obviously, we know that's not true, but we experience a lot of that same stuff. Secondly, the root of the kind of LGBT rights kind of campaign, for want of a better way of putting it, is kind of rooted in the same place. Historically, a lot of trans women, particularly trans women of colour, would identify as kind of, with different identities that now we wouldn't think of as necessarily being a trans woman's identity. So it's not. It shows a bit of a lack of understanding of LGBT history a little bit there, I think, and the politics around how we are fighting against that oppression. So I think it's a bit of a naive. I can understand. It is. I mean, I probably used to have that opinion myself sometimes, but I don't think it's particularly helpful to be suggesting that.
With the positive spin, I suppose I'd put back on that, or the positive sort of way of interpreting it is, she says, "I don't see why the T is grouped in with LGB." The positive way of seeing that is it's just her literally expressing that she doesn't know. She's just expressing expression of ignorance. She wasn't saying, "I don't think they should be grouped together." However, it could very easily be interpreted as supporting that viewpoint, and that's where danger lies.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a fair point. And actually, there's something
you mentioned before that there is a pressure on, seriously, on the sort of more sort of high-profile celebrity trans people to come out and tell their stories and so forth. And one might view that this kind of article is perhaps in that kind of vein. Part of the problem with that, of course, a certain misgender would also fit into this category, is if you're fairly recently sort of out, and especially if you're a celebrity, probably there's a good chance that your transition has perhaps been faster than that of many other people. And therefore, by the time you're then coming forward and telling your story and appearing on TV and putting your story in the paper, so you may not have had very much exposure to other people and perhaps be more well informed of history and background around some of these things and around some of the struggles and this context and history of Stonewall and all that kind of thing. If we just, I'm not saying this is their fault, but if you realise that you're trans, and then people help transition really quickly and then stick you in front of the camera, then yes, you're going to have some poorly formed opinions.
Yeah. That's inevitable.
But then I suppose this brings me on to a point I want to make, which is every time a trans person is doing an interview or on TV in the media of some kind, they seem to be held as the trans person and their opinion is matching everyone in the community. Whereas if you have any woman on TV, does anyone believe that she's representative of all women, a man on TV, representative of all men, a gay person on TV, representative of all gay people? No, it's like everyone's different. But unfortunately in the trans world, people still see us as trans.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with that is just that we are a smaller population, especially in terms of on visibility on telly and so forth. If the total number of trans people that you're seeing is quite small, then each individual voice is quite a high ratio of the opinions that you then form.
I think it's true of an extent of all oppressed groups in a way. For example, when a female pop star releases a video where she's not wearing very clothes, for example, we'll get all the think pieces saying, "Oh, that's not very feminist. She's not helping women as a class," kind of thing. There is this idea that of any group other than cis-het white men, if you're doing something, you are representing your group in some way by doing that, other than that privileged group of cis-het white men who nobody necessarily holds their actions against the whole class. And I think, to Charlotte's point and to Rachel's point, there's not very many of us trans people, so I guess it's just magnified by several fold that because there's not many of us.
Like every single person that has to go on TV or does go on TV or in the newspapers like this must be an expert on everything to do with gender, and it's like, well, I don't know. Do we have to be? Can we not just talk about the things that we're actually good at? She's a TV presenter. I'm a scientist. You're in IT, etc., etc. That's where our expertise lies, not in.
I suppose eventually that is what Ms. Willoughby is heading towards, right? Because she's a panelist on Loose Women. So right now, today, we're talking about the article that she put in the Mail about being trans. But presumably she's not going to be talking about that every day on every appearance on Loose Women. So the other times she will presumably be just a person with opinions about stuff. But right now we're talking about the trans.
I think, again, we're a specific case because we're such a transitory population insofar as people aren't out and then they come out and then they're visible for a bit and then a lot of them disappear again. So even someone is saying in the chat just now, even if 0.1% of people are gender variant, of that 0.1%, the majority of them are either not out or have gone back in essentially to the closet, or they're gender variant in some other way that makes them less visible, or they've got less of a platform because of their gender variance. So it's kind of I think it's difficult for us to get a platform.
It's a difficult ask to. A lot of people don't want to be in the public eye for long periods of time, and they go through a lot of stuff when they're coming out, and then they quite legitimately don't want to have to deal with it in future. We just want to get on with our lives, really, don't we? It's not like, you know, we if we didn't have to fight for these things, then we probably wouldn't be in the public eye at all.
I wonder to what extent would these people continue to be in the public eye if they didn't have the trans thing making them notable in some way, and whether we would still be interested in them if they stopped talking about that.
Well, India Willoughby was already on TV, wasn't she? And so obviously now that she's transitioning or transitioned or whatever, she's got the attention of the press, and particularly.
Yeah, I mean, her profile now is much bigger than it ever was before she came out. She was on local news.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. And to what extent these people feel that they have to continue to talk about that because that's their USP, as it were. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I suppose she gets a lot of these questions all the time, and that's why she's participated in this article.
Then here's a question. Here's a question to ask: should she be allowed to express her own opinions on the matter, or should she kind of present what the gold standard should be? So her personal opinion is maybe the T shouldn't be with LGB. I happen to disagree with that. Our community as a whole generally disagrees with that. So can she express her opinion on the matter, or should she be saying actually LGBTs together? As an example.
I think there's a multifaceted answer to that, and one is, but it's most simply described as it depends. So for me, if she's speaking in a capacity as herself, representing herself, then I think she should absolutely, and I'm saying she needs to talk about her own opinions. That's absolutely fine, and I think that's, and in fact, it's healthy if they are conflicting in some way, because we're not a homogenous mass of people. We have conflicting opinions. So I think that's good. Where it's important, and this isn't a failing of her or indeed any other trans person that has been in this position necessarily, it's a failing of the media system, is that where trans people are put in a position where they are being asked to speak for a community, or they're in a position, on a panel, for example, where they're representing the trans view or something, and they're not representing necessarily the community's views, but only their own. And that's where it's often, but actually because media are selecting the wrong people to be full. I think back to, when we talked about one of the previous nGendrs where there was a Sunday Morning Live programme that the BBC ran, where they talked about trans people in sport. And they got people on there that weren't best qualified to talk about trans people. And one of the people was, but she didn't want to be in the studio. And weren't necessarily best. And in fact, we talk about the NSPCC thing where they tried to get Kelly Maloney on to talk about trans kids, and it's like, this is not the best people to be talking about this. But they won't go to the best people to be talking about that because they're not the highest profile trans person they can find. And again, it goes back to this, because we're a small community, they keep going back to these same 2 or 3 people for everything.
The cynical will also be who suspects that they go to people who are who have opinions that they are happy to air, and therefore the people with the sort of more balanced, well-rounded opinions are a lot more cautious about getting out there and ambushes and so forth. They're wary of being ambushed in the media. So therefore, when someone says, making a program, oh, we need a trans person to talk about X, and we noticed something in the past. I'm pretty sure we've actually had evidence of this. When someone is being approached and say, would you like to talk about this issue, and they say, no, I'm not happy to take part in that program. Basically, they see the trap coming, so they find someone more unsuspecting to take part instead.
Yeah, I think they don't often know who the right person to go to is, but because a lot of us do talk to each other, we do we are very wary of them now because of so many of us have been put in these situations on TV, and it certainly affects the way I think about having a public presence.
Mm.
Yeah. Hi, Natalie. You're back again.
Okay.
This is getting rather tiresome, isn't it?
You're quite good
This
at
is like an extended metaphor for transition. It's like I get into full flow and then I just get cut off and I have to start.
Oh. I was going to go back to one of the comments from a little while ago, actually, in the chat on the side there, about the sort of the LGBT sort of separatism thing, because there was, I think part of the problem is that the part of the article which India Willoughby talked about that, it was just very brief. There's very little detail given to it. If you had a few more paragraphs to expand on it, then you could probably quite easily say, well, these are the reasons why it's useful to have the LGBT as a unit, because we have the same these struggles in common. But at the same time, yes, we recognise that L, G, and B are sexualities and is an identity and so forth, and you can highlight commonalities and differences. But of course, that takes several paragraphs, and I think it's just for a matter of brevity that a lot of us have omitted.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not
just don't. Okay, I suppose you just be wary of space and time and concentrating, just repeating the same old things. But
many of us actually have multiple identities, so it's like, well, T, many of us are LG or B as well. I mean, I count myself as B, and so it's like, well, access T spaces from a bi point of view, not necessarily a trans point of view. So having it together can be helpful. I mean, I guess sometimes it is a bit of a hindrance, because if I access these things, it's like, oh, you're here because you're trans. It's like, actually, no, I'm here because I'm bi. It's multiple identities, and this is a thing that we need to kind of hold on to. Is very rarely are people just one thing. We're many.
Yeah. Yes, very good point. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So.
Sorry.
Go on.
I think I wanted to bring up, which was, I think, something that not a criticism, but on asked like India Willoughby's, it's saying, have you had the ARP? It's like kind of making the point to the public is that it's like gender doesn't equal genitals, and that actually operations are not always necessary. It's a personal choice for the individual. Nobody else's business but them, their doctor, maybe their partner.
Yeah, very much so.
Actually, being trans, you can do it completely op-free, medical.
Yeah. And of course, that there are multiple surgeries that people might access as well, and it differs from one identity to another. So, yeah.
Not everybody can have the surgery for various different reasons, medical reasons. They may just not want surgery because they're afraid of it. There's any number of reasons.
They may, they may not be able to afford it. Obviously outside of the UK, it's there's not public health cover. It may be that they can't afford to take time off work. There's all sorts of reasons why people might not be able to do that. So, yeah.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention, perhaps maybe we want to talk about this article, about India's article in the Mail there. The way she talks about herself, her previous sort of, before transition identity as a third person, which I just wonder what people think about that, because in some senses that comes across to me as really odd, but at the same time, I think they do it as well sometimes. I think the answer is, I think the key word is sometimes. Nobody else got any strong opinions on that?
I've obviously got strong opinions on it, but I'll let someone else go first.
I was thinking depends really. I suppose someone that then refers to the past as a third person, I mean, it's a difficult thing to go through, and I suppose one way might be to compartmentalize your past. Personally, I don't. I've always been me, and past, present, future, I am me. But it's like the people that are just coming out, it's like, ooh, have you met X yet? Or then look in the past, it's like, oh well, X did this. But yeah, I think it's a means of compartmentalizing to help cope with actually a difficult and very large change.
Yeah, I think it would come across as especially sort of feel wrong for me if someone was to refer to themselves in the third person in the past consistently. If it was just before this date it was a different person, and after it's me. I think that would make me go kind of that's a bit weird. But then again, but if it was just an occasional thing, you sometimes refer to yourself in the past as first person, sometimes third, and even the present. To be honest, I can refer to, each of us can refer to ourselves in the present as either the first or third person. It happens sometimes. It's just the way that language works.
I think there's a couple of things that might be factors here. I think one is that particularly I think how people have arrived at their realization of trans identity. So I think quite often you get the idea that we've talked about this before on the videos, that people kind of have this like double life period where they sometimes they're living part, and this was definitely the case with India Willoughby, where she was doing literally, in her words, exactly this double life. So I think sometimes going back to this compartmentalization thing, I think that's a factor, and I think that's quite pertinent here, because I think sometimes people do have to compartmentalize it a bit, sometimes just for reasons of being pragmatic about it, but I think sometimes it's a little bit kind of, and I've experienced a bit of this myself, where you are kind of, it's that denial bit a little bit, where you're kind of trying to distance yourself from what the other identity was.
Yeah.
And I think following on from that, I think you quite often see where people perhaps have been someone that they weren't particularly proud of being in the past. They will very much try and distance themselves from that. If you were a bit of a misogynist in the past or whatever, which people often are, it's very easy for people to go, well, that wasn't me anyway, that was him.
Yes, so to be honest,
And sometimes you have to own that and say, I was a twat, learn and grown.
Yeah,
I've been that.
As I was saying, a couple of minutes ago, and saying that sometimes I refer to myself in the past as third person. I think that's usually in the context of negative things, like saying that person over there, he's a dickhead. It's me, of course, but it's just a way of expressing, negative feelings towards the self, but it's also a very different aspect of myself, and therefore, yes, it's a way of compartmentalizing, I suppose. Interesting things turn up in the chat. Someone saying, that India might not think of herself like that. It's just how she explains the concept to other people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's not necessarily the best way to explain to other people, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, there is a risk that by using those words, if she is using it as an explanation, then you introduce confusion and unhelpful concept as well. But yes, it might not be that.
Sometimes it's difficult to find the words, though, isn't it? And it is really difficult to comment. If you've ever tried to explain to somebody how you're trans and how actually how you come to that realization, it is really hard to find those correct words. So it's a minefield.
I think the answer to that is you just know.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people won't accept that. So I'm conscious of time because we don't have very long left, and I want to make sure that we haven't got any other key points that anybody wants to make before we end. So is there anything from in the room or anything in the chat that anyone wanted to quickly talk about in the last 5 minutes before we finish?
I believe so. No, just having a look at the chat and.
No, this is. I think one thing I've noticed has been some good chat tonight in the chat, yeah. So that's been really positive. I think
people funding visitor courses that we obviously love people to participate and come along, and we love having a chat. We'd also, of course, love to have more NBs, trans men, and so forth. So
yes.
very nice.
So yeah, that brings me to my final point, which is obviously clearly we're still looking for people to try and help us out. We are particularly interested in people who want to obviously contribute content to us, and like I said, that could be writing, it could be videos, it could be art, it could be pictures, it could be anything like that. We want to be representative, so once again, we're all white trans women here, so we want to get other identities as well. We want to get trans men, we want to get non-binary people, we want to get trans and non-binary people of colour, we want to get trans and non-binary people with disabilities, neurodivergent people, that kind of stuff. So we're going to be representative, and you know, we have some of that stuff already, and sometimes these things aren't necessarily known, but we have that. But we want to be better, so get in touch with any of us if you want to help out, or tweet us on n_GENDR, or go on the Facebook page, or comment on the YouTube video, or email us at emailngender@gmail.com. Be happy to hear from people. I know probably people might have tried to get in contact with us a couple of months ago. We weren't that responsive, but we will be better now. So yeah, and if you've got ideas for topics that you want us to talk about in future as well, we'll be keen to hear on that as well. Normally we've been talking about stuff that's been in the news, but it doesn't always have to be the way. We've got a few other topics we want to talk about in the future that might be more kind of just general topics that we all experience or are all interested in. So happy to hear from you on that as well. But I think that's everything, so we'll say goodbye. So I guess it's bye from Charlotte.
Bye.
It's bye from Luna.
Bye, thanks very much.
Bye from Rachel.
Good night, thank you for watching.
And goodbye from me. Thank you everyone for watching, and speak to you all later. Goodbye.